So welcome back to the channel. Should you buy a house or not in 2003? I'm going to tell you what my thoughts are. I've done some research and about how a mistake I made cost me about £100,000, how you can avoid the same mistake. The weather's awful. Let's get inside and get on with the video. So we're in the barn that came with the last house I purchased. It's quite a large structure. There's bit of junk in the background that I'm still working through. It's about 10 meters by 5 meters square. It was in a bit of a mess, but it came with a house, which was a really good buy because we know that people have sort of been interested in purchasing just the barn and not the house because it's detached. Before was we were going to sell our last house pre-COVID. The market was sort of stagnating a bit, and we're actually only going to make a small amount of money on that property, but actually make a small loss if you took out the stamp duty fees and everything else. But we decided to leave it because the market had sort of stalled. Anyway, we decided to go back on the market just before, just while COVID was happening, and we sort of sold the property. And then the government did a really silly thing because interest rates had been extremely low for a while, which had sort of fueled the increase in house prices in the UK to sort of ridiculous levels. And then they dropped the stamp duty and it pushed house prices even higher. Everyone thought it was going to be a big market crash, and there wasn't. Property went up even higher. So I was actually in a position where I was just going to decide I was going to rent. I was going to see what happened with the market, and then maybe buy at later stages. Everything's okay. Thankfully, I didn't do that, because if I'd waited, I probably couldn't afford to buy the place that I now own, because it would have been way above my budget. But we didn't know that. But hey, low interest rates, no stamp duty has pushed the house prices up even more. And we are where we're at today. Let's get back in the office. We'll talk about the housing market and why I think you should still buy a house in 2023. Let's get back inside. So, $1 million question is, should you buy a house in 2023 or should you wait? Well, as usual, it depends on your circumstances and a lot of other things. Firstly, let's sort of rewind the clock and go back to 2008. So, in the crash of 2008, for people that don't know, banks stopped lending money because companies and banks were going bust, and the government had to bail them out because they were breaching the ratios of the assets that they had to hold in terms of what they were lending out. So as soon as the banks stopped lending money, people were unable to borrow it to buy property and other things, which meant that if you needed to sell a property and you had less buyers, you had to reduce the cost of property, so the house price dipped. Put the chart on screen in a minute. Anyway, since 2008, the banks dropped the interest rates so low to stimulate the economy that house prices have gradually gone up steadily since then. And around the time of COVID, everyone thought the market was going to crash again. We were going to sell. We decided to sell, and we'd actually sold our house. And then they announced the news that they were going to have no stamp duty. So all of a sudden, loads of people rushed out to buy properties. And what happens? Because you've got more demand than you have got supply, the prices shot up again. So everyone thought the prices were going to dip. They didn't. They went up. But anyway, that's what's happened in the housing market. At the moment, interest rates have gone up again, so that means that slowly there's been a bit less demand, so house prices have dropped slightly. However, it's all kind of relative, because we were in a situation where everything was a bit overinflated because of the COVID thing, the low cost of borrowing, and the stamp duty. So that kind of, we are, I guess, due a bit of a correction in the market, and that's what we're seeing at the moment. So if you're renting a property, it still might be a good time for you to buy, because the problem with renting, and I rented in and around London, which is obviously very difficult to buy because the cost of property is so high. However, I wasn't paying down my mortgage. I was renting and giving someone else that money, so it was dead money. However, I didn't have a problem with the property to sell. I could move where I wanted to move, and I didn't have a problem with house prices dropping. However, the main thing that caused me an issue was the fact that I wasn't paying down a mortgage, so I had no equity. So it was very difficult for me to get a deposit together to purchase a house. I did that in the end, and the thing that saved me in terms of being able to move and have a smaller mortgage was the fact that I didn't make money on the last property because of the stamp duty, because I paid double the stamp duty cost because I had more than one property. So with that taken into consideration, we probably just about broke even on the house. However, I paid down the mortgage. I paid a large chunk of money off the mortgage. Therefore, I had a big lump of equity to go against the new property. And that's the problem in general, is most people don't have that equity. They don't consider maybe moving outside London, maybe buying a place in another area of the country, renting that out so that someone's paying off your loan, so you've got some equity to go into another property. Or they don't consider maybe going together with other family members, or sharing a property, or buying somewhere, renting out the spare room, buying somewhere and renting out 3 other rooms. Lots of people don't want to do that, but if you do and you're paying down the mortgage, it will put you in quite a strong position. So their strategies I would obviously recommend as a good idea in terms of trying to get on the ladder. So at the moment, the way interest rates are, I probably wouldn't have bought the last property, because it would have cost me another £1,000 a month more. So that's not £1,000, it's £1,000 a month more on the mortgage payments. In fact, if the mortgage had been on current rates, I probably wouldn't have bought the property, because my mortgage and my outgoings would be pretty high. So that's why we're in the situation we're in at the moment. So it still could be a good time to buy. The problem with the last house was that we couldn't really add enough value to it. So I'd say that's a big thing. If you're looking to make money out of property and make sure you get a good deal, then you're going to have to add value to it. So it would have been very difficult for me to service that mortgage, which obviously that has added to the market in terms of people like me buying houses, which ordinarily I wouldn't buy, because the monthlies on the mortgage would have just been too much of a stretch, really. So let's talk about new houses, and a report released by Barratt Homes recently that said that the sale of new homes had dropped. But what they didn't mention is that new home sales only made up for 2% of total market sales. And in the previous year, it was a lot higher. And the previous year, it was higher than that. So it was about, I think, 10%, then 19%. So that has dropped. But they still sold £3 billion worth of new homes in the UK in 2022. Still a large number of homes. So you can see the headline, but underneath it, obviously the figures are slightly different. So what can you do to protect yourself against this? Well, I bought a property in 2005. I very stupidly sold a property, a house before then, and then purchased a flat. Now, the house had gone up significantly in value in the last 15 years, but the flat hadn't. When the market dropped, the value of the flat dropped quite a large way, and I made the decision to move out the property and just rent it out, because the rent more than covered the mortgage, which was fine. So that's an option to you if you're nervous about buying and you're thinking the market might drop. Well, it could do, but usually rents increase as well, again because of sort of supply and demand. I mean, there's always less rentals on the market than there are people looking for them, so something to bear in mind. I rented it out. However, the mistake of selling the house and buying the flat cost me over £100,000, mainly because, as I found out, apart from the London area, flats don't really appreciate that well against houses. In London, obviously, it's quite different, because the average cost of a property is very high, and the average cost of a flat in an apartment in London is quite high as well. And there are probably more people live in apartments in London than there are in houses. So yeah, that was the expensive mistake that I made. I wouldn't make it again. If I was going to buy another buy to let, I would probably buy a small family home, And again, I would try and add value to that home. I would try and take it from a 1-bed to a 2-bed, or a 2-bed to a 3-bed, or buy something that was quite dilapidated and refurbish it all and add value to protect myself against fluctuations in the market and the property decreasing in value. So overall, in 2023, I think it depends on your circumstances. If it was me and I was renting a place, I could afford to buy, had an offer from the mortgage company, I may take a 2-year fix or a If it was me, would I buy a property in 2023? I guess it would depend what the monthlies are on current rates. Could I afford them if the interest rates do go a little bit higher? Can I add value to it? How long am I going to be there? What happens if my income drops? These are all sort of questions that you would ask anyway. And maybe if property drops a little bit, it might do, but chances are over the long term, again, as has been proven since sort of 2008 and before then up to the crash, property does generally go up over the long term. So those are the facts. Let me know in the comments if you've got any questions, and we'll see you in the next video.